So I'm having an awesome day today on this beautiful morning. And what I want to talk about right now is how luck is not what you think it is. And I want to look at it from a different perspective. Because on the surface level, luck looks like something that just happens out of nowhere, like some magical, mystical surprise. Like finding $20 in your pocket or something. Or for some people, like finding $20 in someone else's pocket. Or maybe finding $20 after it's been through the washer and dryer cycle a few times and you can't even recognize it's $20 anymore. But I really want to break this down so that we can pull more luck into our lives and make things happen more frequently. So the first thing to keep in mind is something called situational awareness, which is crucial for understanding your surroundings and things in your environment that you can either take advantage of or look out for. And then you want to be able to understand that things change with time so you can better anticipate future developments, which is going to lead to you seizing more opportunities. And realistically, knowing the position that you're in and being able to process information quickly so you can make more informed decisions that are ultimately going to benefit you and those around you. It's the same reason why people in positions like first responders or pilots, high-level CEOs, they all need that situational awareness so that they can make the right connections and avoid a lot of the costly mistakes. Now, if you read any of Nassim Taleb's work, he has a book called Fooled by Randomness. And in that book, he talks a lot about cognitive bias or logical fallacies. And basically, one of the things that he talked about was this thing called the gambler's fallacy. And what that basically means is, say you take a coin out of your pocket, a regular quarter, and they're making bets. You flip the quarter. It's tails. The other person loses. Tails. Boom. They're going around making bets real quick. Tails, tails. You get tails 6, 7, 8 times in a row. Now it's your turn. What are you going to bet? They flip the coin. Heads or tails? Do you think it's more likely to be heads because you already got so many tails, it's got to be heads? Then you just fell victim to the gambler's fallacy. Whatever happened before has nothing to do with the isolated flip that is in front of you right then and there. And see, a lot of people fell victim to this, like a lot of new traders in 2020. They were getting on Robinhood, making trades. But if you looked at stocks, right, and you're like, okay, I could just buy low and sell high and just look at the charts and do it that way and make a 15 to 30% profit every 3 to 4 months whenever it, makes a turnaround. But that's not always necessarily the case, and there's so many other things that you have to take into consideration, like fundamental analysis and things like this, that people just ended up just gambling on the stock market, basically. A lot of people lost money when that thing with GameStop happened. That was an unpredictable event, like a black swan event. Or, nobody thought Tesla was just going to keep going and going like the Energizer Bunny, and they shorted the stock and ended up losing a lot of money. So basically what Nassim Taleb would argue against is actual skill in doing research is more important than luck. That's what it boils down to in that book. Now, that's more in the realm of commodities. But what about you increasing the chances of getting to your goals, your achievements, and your desires? So just like in the world of stock trading, where you're using fundamental analysis, risk management, and having discipline and emotional control, you can use a lot of those same fundamentals when approaching your life to avoid being in unfavorable situations and increase your chances of success toward your endeavors. Now, aside from all that technical jargon, which actually means nothing at all if the mindset isn't right, because if we don't realize how lucky we are right now, luck tends to abandon us. So, since hindsight is always 20/20, how do we increase our foresight now for probabilities so that we can see more opportunities on the horizon later? And looking back on my life, there was a few brief moments which didn't seem brief at the time, but it seemed like everything that could go wrong always did end up going wrong. I was in a lot of trouble with the law, and I was learning basically every lesson you could learn the hard way. But it seemed like every time I tried to improve, I ended up right back where I started. And it was frustrating when I was younger because it seemed like I had a real knack for finding trouble. But on top of that, trouble had its own knack for finding me. And basically, no matter how hard I tried to escape it, I always found myself handcuffed in the back of a police car. So I always ended up back in that tangled web that I've woven for myself. And every time I managed to climb out, I would end up back in there. So, back then, it was easy for me to just think that most of the world was just negative and I was just trying to survive in it like a lot of the people that I knew. Like I was a crumb inside the world where the rich run it. But I remember during this time, I remember watching TV and seeing people on TV and thinking, damn, they're born in the right place at the right time. It seems like they have it made. They have everything. They're more fortunate, I would say to myself. While I'm stuck in this repetitive loop of mistakes and consequences, and I'm less fortunate. And I felt bitter, right? But as I got older, I soon realized how I wasn't less fortunate, and I was incredibly lucky. Because a lot of the people that I ran with growing up ended up facing long prison sentences, severe addictions, and even losing their lives. So somehow, despite all my run-ins with the law and everything that I've been through, I still always had another chance to turn things around. And for that, I'm incredibly lucky. So I remember when I was in jail for like 30 days. And I had this cellmate where he was a couple years younger than me. He was from a real rough neighborhood. And he was always in trouble, right? He was already serving consecutive sentences for a lot of different things. But one day he had to appear in court. And when he got back, I just remember he was like bragging to one of the other inmates through the door. He was just talking through that little window in the door. And he was like, yeah, I got another 6 years added on to my sentence. And in total, he was looking at over a decade. So he was like, yeah, I'm about to do another decade. And he's laughing about this to the other inmate. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, like, this is like, why are you happy about this? But I put myself in his shoes. And I think he may have been trying to psych himself up into serving that much time. So whether he was pretending to think it was all good, I'm like looking at it, I'm like, I can't wait till I'm out of here in a couple weeks and I'm in the free world and I can appreciate the outside world again. And he's got to look to the next 10 plus years in captivity. And so I thought about it to myself and I'm like, I put myself in his shoes. And as soon as I did that, bam, it hit me. I said, you know what? I could have been psychologically damaged to the point where that could have been me. It could have been anybody. So I actually considered myself very lucky that I wasn't in his shoes. I was lucky that I can reflect on my past decisions and take accountability to make a change. Most of all, I was lucky that I held myself in higher esteem. Because you see, I used to look at my arrest as me just being a product of my environment. In fact, they were repetitive wake-up calls instead. They were reminders that were trying to steer me away from a much darker place. So because I expected greater from myself, I didn't tolerate that same unlucky lifestyle. And see, the problem with a lot of people, especially younger people, is that they get so caught up and so wrapped up into the lifestyle that it doesn't even seem realistic to get out. Because they keep making the same unconscious decisions over and over and over again. It's kind of like saying you want to get healthy, but you keep stocking up the kitchen with cookies, cakes, ice cream, donuts, candy. Or it's like saying you want to quit drinking alcohol, but you just want to keep the liquor cabinet stocked just for decoration. And then the decorations always end up in your stomach. So I actually grew up with a lot of kids that were natural talents. A lot of them could have been professional boxers, Major League Baseball players, especially. And I can think of a few right now. I only know one kid that actually made it to Major League Baseball. And it's kind of cool because I used to ride bikes with him and play baseball in my backyard with this guy. And I saw some of his highlights later and I was like, wow, that's amazing. It's awesome to see somebody that you grew up with make it somewhere. But there were others who for sure you thought they were going, like, these kids were that good. And you know, a lot of things happen, whatever, you know, sometimes it doesn't pan out because of certain circumstances or situations that come up. But I think one of the biggest things is that if they grew up in an environment that fostered some of the top players that you see or top athletes that you see today on your TV screen, there's no question in my mind that they would have been there. And I don't think they would have just been your average just professional. I think they would have been talked about amongst the greats throughout history, you know? So it's kind of sad to me to see that not happen. But you know, when I think about it, it's probably not always the worst thing. I mean, they probably could have served or fulfilled a different purpose that had immense value. So there's still some luck there. But, you know, the fact that we didn't get to see that is something to take note of. But what I noticed is there's probably all kinds of young people with all kinds of different talents that never come to fruition because of self-sabotaging activities and unconscious decisions. Or maybe just not fully believing they can make it that far, or not having the right knowledge or guidance. And it wasn't until some years later that I came across a book that was actually written in the 30s but wasn't published until 2011. You should do your research on why, but the name of the book is called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. And it explains how when people don't have a definite will toward their goal or their desire, they tend to get distracted and they're more derailed by negative influences. And there's also the concept of drifting, where you don't have control over your thoughts and you're manipulated by your environment in this way. And then because we're creatures of habit, another thing that starts to kick in is this hypnotic rhythm. And you're just going through the motions like an automaton in this hypnotic rhythm, hypnotized in a trance every day. And, you know, it becomes even harder to break free from these negative patterns at that point. So the book explains, and it really emphasizes the importance of breaking out of this as quick as possible. And you got to use self-discipline. You got to master yourself, and you got to make sure you're surrounding yourself with positive influences and staying away from negative ones. Also, doubling down on your self-education and having a strong belief in yourself. And so when I was in that correctional facility, what I realized is a lot of those inmates, they're in that hypnotic rhythm. And it keeps them returning back into the prison doors over and over and over again. And so I really hope that some of them had a chance to read that book so that they can change the trajectory of their life, you know, or other books like it. But the other thing that I realized was that you don't have to be at rock bottom to benefit from that book. You don't have to be in jail to benefit from a book like that, because you can mentally be in jail as well. So when I had stepped into that cellmate's shoes, what I realized was I was actually more lucky than I thought I was at the time. Because see, I was locked down physically, but mentally I was becoming free right then and there. And when talking to a lot of the inmates, I realized that we were there because our thoughts had been manipulated. And we were in that hypnotic rhythm. And we had to change our thoughts and our thinking if we wanted to truly get free. You see, in life you have to notice subliminal messages. It's funny because just yesterday I was listening to Ralph Smart's, infinite waters diving deep once again. Shout out to Ralph Smarts. Go check out his page if you haven't watched it. But he was talking about the social matrix. And I remembered back when I first heard the term the social matrix I think it was 1999. Either 1999 or 2000 I heard that term, the social matrix. And it was from a friend of mine. We did music together, and he had a song. It was called Minds Are Trapped in the Social Matrix. And he had a couple of verses. It was him solo on the song, and he had the hook and everything. But I remember it literally shifted my consciousness because he broke down how the social matrix is, and I understood how mind control works. In fact, mind control works so good that you could be fully aware of it and still be manipulated by it. Years later, I realized that I was actually lucky to be into making music, which led me into meeting certain people that had a positive impact on my life. You see, because at the time, hip-hop music was, most of it, or a lot of it, was into, gaining knowledge and wisdom. So that's kind of where I get my philosophical roots from and my love for, philosophy. When you look back on your life, you can see the circumstances where you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you can also see all the circumstances where you were in the right place at the right time. And when you choose to look at the circumstances where you were in the right place at the right time, with that perspective, you're making the connection to see more of the right things happening at the right time, actually, before they happen. And so, instead of seeing yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, essentially what's happening is you're going from being the victim to being victorious. All it is basically living up to the expectations that you see for yourself. For me, it was like I had a parasite in the mind that continuously sucked me back into the social matrix, to using things in my environment, like the books, the hobbies I had, the people I surrounded myself with, that starved out the parasite and made it so that I can create my own paradigm. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into this so we can find out how we can create our own paradigm instead of the one that's laid out for us in society, so that we can open up new possibilities that we didn't even know were there. The first thing you got to realize is society is a very intricate and well thought out system. It's like a web, and more things are connected in that web than you might think. So let's just say, for entertainment purposes only, this is hypothetical, right? Say that we're going to create a movie, and in this movie we have certain advertising platforms that only advertise certain food corporations, which tend to cause a certain ailment or condition and a need for a certain treatment. And then you might have, in this movie, the entertainment side of the industry, which deliberately injects certain content into the movies and music, which causes a certain reaction in the minds of the young people that lead them into the penitentiary or some other organization. In all the places that the money flows in this movie, the buck always stops in the same spot. And let's just say the name of this movie is called Harsh Reality. Pretty wild, huh? Now, I want to get back into probabilities because of the lottery ticket mentality. You got to understand that all gambling just preys on the emotional side of a person's brain. Gambling is an addiction just like any other. And essentially what they're doing is preying on your ignorance, because If you win a scratch ticket, say for $5,000 or $10,000, it's not luck if you already spent $35K to get it. So that's why the house always wins, because they understand probabilities. So instead of being the customer or the consumer, be the house. This whole thing about manifesting lottery numbers is getting a little ridiculous because we're losing sight of what it actually means to take control of elements in our environment and alchemically manifest things with what we have at our disposal. Look, I'm not trying to come at you like I'm from some moral high ground. I'm a bit of a reject, but what my superpower is being observant. I've always been that way. And I do know this. If you're trying to manifest lottery numbers, you might as well try to manifest $10 million falling out of an airplane in the sky while you're outside going for a walk. Because there's no genie at the quick pick machine that is going to grant you your wish. You can still think positively and realistically at the same time. Improve yourself, don't delude yourself. Instead of trying to manifest winning lottery numbers, it would be better to manifest the amount of action steps that are needed to make the 100 million or the 10 million or whatever your number is. And then feel all the emotions that go along with that every step of the way. Look, I'm sure there's somebody out there who was trying to manifest lottery numbers on record and they actually did it. Just like I'm sure that somebody actually won in a hypnotic daze as well, just going through the motions, buying the ticket every day. But the exception doesn't define the rule. And this video is more about the law of probabilities and what we can do to lean those probabilities in our favor. So let's look at how cultural effect can happen in a positive way. If you've ever heard of the Cosby effect. Now, the Cosby Show was a popular American television show that aired from the year, I think, 1984 to 1992. But it was an upper middle class family living in Brooklyn, New York. And the father was Cliff Huxtable, which was played by Bill Cosby, and the mother was Claire Huxtable, played by Felicia Rashad. And Bill Cosby was an obstetrician. The mother was a lawyer. And so during and after the airing of the show, what they found was a significant increase in African American students enrolling and pursuing careers in the specific fields of law and medicine. So what that shows you is that show had a positive psychological effect. In the year 2000, another significant psychological effect happened to the negative side when the movie Gone in 60 Seconds came out. Now, this movie aired in theaters in the year 2000. And if you haven't seen the movie, basically Nicolas Cage played a retired car thief, and he had to save his brother from a crime lord because he owed a significant debt. So they had to steal 50 specific cars in one night. Now, Cage was known for his ability to steal cars very fast, and the goal for him and his crew was to steal each car within 60 seconds. Car theft had been at all-time highs in the 90s, right? But in 1990, it was at its peak. And year over year, car theft had been going down steadily. But when this movie was aired in the year 2000, they noticed a significant spike, especially in those major cities. Over the next 2 years, this lasted. So that shows you that people emulate what they see. And when you get a better picture of the intricate web that's laid out for you, you can better understand how these things happen. I mean, it's all about knowledge and understanding. It's like when you go into business for yourself and you don't know how to incorporate your name, you're going to pay way more in taxes as a sole proprietor. And if you don't know how to put money back into your business and write that money off on your taxes, you're most likely going to go out of business. That's just the statistics. Those are the probabilities. So these are all the things that you have to take into consideration when you're trying to create a life on your own terms. It's like being a cog in a machine, and when the cog runs out, it's only replaced by another forgettable cog. You know, because the whole purpose of the cog is to keep the machine running, and that's it. And so another way to look at it is like this. With knowing how the machine works, we don't have enough time or energy to waste. Even if you're 20 years old right now, and if it does take 10,000 hours to become a master at something, and you manage to squeeze out 2 hours a day extra on your craft, that means after 5,000 days, you become so good that they can't ignore you. And so 5,000 days, if you don't miss a single day, it's going to take you 13.7 years to get to that point. So how far along are you now, and how far do you have to go? There's a lot of people who scroll on social media for more than 2 hours a day. You know, and I'm not saying don't go on social media or watch TV and movies. There's definitely a good cause for that. And actually, I think it's necessary. But when you spend that much time on it, you're actually becoming a master at being a consumer. So I guess the ultimate thing to do would be to measure how much time you're putting into your objective, your goal, your craft, your passion, and actually mark it down, because what gets measured gets managed. Now, you don't have to have all these intricate spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff. I'm not this analytical guy either. I mean, sometimes I just mark down tally marks in a notebook or on a calendar. You know, I'm more creative than I am organizational by far. But if you like the spreadsheet method, that's even better. But keep track of it in some way so you can look on your progress and say, wow, I put 16 hours in this week. Or I put 12 hours in this week. Let me try to see if I can beat my record next week. You know? And when you look at it like that, you look at, okay, a whole workday is 8 hours. Most people aren't even really engaged in their workday, but if you're engaged and you're deeply focused when you're doing all this work, you have a better chance because you're noticing your progress. So that just about wraps it up for part 1. But stay tuned for part 2 in this series, because I want to get into some of the tools, tips, and tactics that'll broaden the landscape of luck into our lives so that we can have better experiences and reach the goals and aspirations that we have. And I really want to thank you for being here today with me on this video. And till the next one, we'll see you again.